Specialist Academic Advisor at the Manoa Advising Center on the University of Hawaii at Manoa campus in Honolulu, Hawaii. He has previously presented on topics such as career advising, exploratory students, curriculum development, and using self-reflection in advising. Matt has backgrounds in both academic advising and career development and has designed 3 scaffolded academic courses for major and career exploration. Matt currently serves on NACADA's Global Initiatives Committee. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here, Matt.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're able to work this out. I know, in a way, this has kind of been in the works for way over a year, and so finally, our schedules aligned. We got to
Yeah.
make it happen, and it was great connecting with you again in person at the Cincinnati conference, which I'm sure we're going to talk about one of the presentations you did there. But how about we start with how you got to where you're at? What was your journey like getting into higher ed and academic advising?
Well, as pretty much everyone, you don't ever go into higher ed thinking you're like going into a college experience thinking that you're going to be there forever. My undergraduate degree is actually in creative writing and a minor in communication studies, and I'm really focusing more on rhetoric. Because at the time I was in undergrad, I was dead set on being a book or magazine publisher. But didn't talk to career services until my graduating semester, which now being on the other side of it, I can't believe I did that, but I it was just it is what it was. Um, but kind of going back a little bit too, I went to a small private institution, so it was all uh, faculty advising. That was the model. So we didn't have professional advisors, and I was given the course catalog, when I first stepped foot on campus, and I read it and it made sense. So I was the person that all my friends turned to around registration just to kind of build stuff out and navigate and understand requirements. And I didn't know that was a thing. Uh, and um, so anytime I did meet with my advisor, she was the specialist in creative writing for the institution, we never talked about coursework or anything. She said, "Oh, yep, you've got your plan, you're good," and we just talked about everything else. And so I didn't really know what advising was at the time until I met with career services and was talking about what I was doing and everything. And he mentioned, that's a career path, right? Like, okay, yeah, I guess. And at the time, it was a little too late to apply to graduate programs, so I ended up uh, moving back to my hometown in Colorado and got a job in financial planning, because that linear path makes sense to everybody, creative writing to financial planning. And part of that too is I can work with clients, I can talk with people, and all of that. So I worked in the financial planning for a couple years through the recession of '08 and all of that fun times. But I knew I wasn't going to stay there long term, and I was looking at different opportunities, knew I was at that point going to go to graduate school. So I was just applying or looking at opportunities, and I was debating, did I want to continue with creative writing, go into just a PhD in English, or still think about this, student affairs higher ed route? And ultimately chose the student affairs route because I didn't have to make a decision. Because if I was working at an institution, I could continue to take classes towards something else. And that's kind of the way I approach a lot of things. I want to keep as many doors open as long as possible. And that kind of is how I approach working with students too. Uh, Now that I'm like revisiting it, like I was always very intentional about some of these little things, such as I was only looking at programs that required an assistantship because I didn't have that more traditional route for a lot of student affairs professionals of being an RA or being in student activities. I worked for the English department as like a student secretary. That was my on-campus job experience. So I knew I needed to kind of expand out on that a little bit more. So I wanted that mandatory assistantship. And so ultimately, yeah, got into the program uh, at Iowa State, did that for a couple of years, and then had 2 assistantships my final year, one in the Career Center and the other in the advising office for the College of Business. So they liked that I had that professional business experience, and it was nice to get that balance of the two. Um, from there, while at that office, that's when I got plugged into Nakata. I applied for the graduate student scholarship to go to the Region 6 conference in 2011. 2000, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 2011. Yeah, up in Winnipeg. Um, and so I credit my entire experience at Nakata to Amy Sanis because she was chair of Region 6 at the time. And she got me connected as soon as I got to the conference. I was really lucky that the annual conference in 2011 was in Denver. So I was able to go stay with my parents and just drive down for the conference and really get connected there. And I have not missed a Nakata conference since Denver. So that is one thing that I do hold very close. Um, but yeah, and actually at the Denver conference is where I met Megumi. We sat next to each other at a peer advisor session that ended up being more like a hands-on workshop, and we just got to talking. And yeah, I was keeping my doors wide open for where I was going to apply after finishing my graduate degree. I had certain criteria that I needed to have met, and uh, one of them was like growth and structure in a position. I didn't want to like do a move every 2 years. Um, and so, just in talking to Megumi, she was explaining a little bit about the model that most of the offices at University of Hawaii has. Um, and she couldn't say it at the time, but there was an opening that was going to come up soon. So yeah, I was able to apply to a couple different places, but ultimately ended up at Manoa because I really wanted to work just with the exploratory, the undecided students. Working in the College of Business was great. I definitely learned a lot there, but it at times can feel a little repetitive when you're talking about the same programs with students just day in and day out. And I really needed more of that variety.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because it's just how random it is when you go to conferences and you just happen to just sit next to someone and the conversation sparks, and then that literally changes like the trajectory of what you're
Hmm.
doing. But I'm even thinking back to when you were in college, and then you had your friends that were going to you for
Hmm.
answers for a lot of like these advising type questions that we get. And a lot of times we say, don't talk to your friends, make sure you talk to someone at the institution. But you were the one that's the exception. You were the one giving them all the right answers.
That's because I always refer to the catalog. Like my catalog, I need to find it. I don't remember what box it's in, but it is falling apart. Like the binding is gone on it because I was flipping through all of it. And yeah, I it didn't occur to me at the time that that was weird.
Mhm.
And then yeah, like I said, yeah, we don't tell it. We tell our students, yeah, don't listen to your friends.
Right.
And I think even then, I was still like couching a little bit and like, okay, but still confirm with your advisor, confirm with whomever at the institution, just to confirm that
Mhm.
this is how I'm reading it. But yeah.
Well, the extra part of you saying, yeah, yeah, double check with your advisor, or someone, your faculty or somebody, that's usually the part that gets left out a lot of times. But you're at work in the Manoa Advising Center. So, what student
Mhm.
populations do you serve? And then I guess from there, you have this role as assistant specialist academic advisor. So, what exactly does that mean within your advising center?
Yeah. So the Manoa Advising Center, our population of students is we assist exploratory students, so undecided, undeclared, open option, whatever your institution calls it. Yeah, for us, we were able to get it changed to exploratory back in 2016, which was very exciting. Before that, the label was general arts and sciences, which just didn't fit correctly anymore. Um, but our student population, um, it's roughly about 10% of the undergraduate population at Manoa. And we currently don't have a cap on how long students are allowed to be in the exploratory program. We don't graduate anyone, so they can't get a degree in exploratory, but our goal is to get them into the major that best fits their skills, values, interests, goals, abilities. Um, yep. And really, we're trying to get them to declare earlier. So we do have a small population of senior class standing, junior, and then a big chunk of our population, actually about half of our students would fall into like a pre-business category, but we don't have that pre-business designation. Uh, the Manoa Advising Center has existed on the Manoa campus since 2008 or fall 2008 and had some of those pre-majors, but we were able to move those pre-majors back to their programs where they could get, more more in-depth advising in that specific program. So like pre-psychology students shouldn't be with us; they should be with the psychology department. So our numbers, have stabilized down to about 15 to 1600 students. Again, it's always fluctuating, um, and we don't belong to a specific college or school within the university, and that is very intentionally done so that we don't have an implicit bias or stake in any one unit. Um, so we do have to have an understanding of all the majors on campus. And how we kind of talk about that too with our students is we've got that shallow knowledge across the board, and we need to refer them to the major advisors or their college or school for that really in-depth, deep understanding of the program. Our office is staffed with specialist academic advisors, and that term is a little confusing to anyone outside of the University of Hawaii system. Uh, Not every advisor on our campus, but a chunk of them do fall under a faculty specialist designation. So I was hired into a tenure track faculty role, but my primary job is academic advising. So I always want to put out that I'm an assistant specialist, just identifies me as that faculty role on campus, because that does allow me to serve on different faculty committees. And we do fall under our faculty union. We are still we're faculty, even though we're not required to teach or have that as our primary project. So yeah, if you are looking at an institution with their faculty model, junior, assistant, associate, and full, we have those same designations on our campus. Uh, we also have professional advisors under our administrative, professional, and technical designation. So a lot of times we'll refer to them as APTs versus the faculty advisors. So that is definitely an interesting model that the University of Hawaii holds. I know at other institutions they may have, faculty advisors, but whether that's their full time or their main project is like a primary role advisor versus as an additional duty under their research or instruction. Uh, we're not the only system nationally that has that. I and I know that it's really the tenure track process that makes ours a little bit more unique. So I started at the Manoa Advising Center in 2012, and we have I call it a 5-year probationary period as you're going through the process to apply for tenure. So you have 2 contract renewals during that time, and then the big piece is the full tenure application process, which usually the deadline, at least for our institution, lands right before NACADA every year. So trying to scramble and get ready while you're putting this document together, it's always a stressful time. So I submitted my documentation in 2016, in October 2016, but it has multiple layers that of the review. And this is what I really like about this tenure process is it really is focusing on kind of professionalizing academic advising in general. Our duties are broken down into 3 broad categories. So professional activities and functions, professional development and scholarly contributions, and then the final one is service. So each unit at UH Manoa that has faculty specialists will have their own document for the review criteria, and like the percentage of your time for each of those categories is going to be split a little bit differently. For my office, we have 75% of our time on professional activities and functions, and those are going to include your one-on-one student appointments, and the other big part of that also is program development. So what are you doing to help your office, work on some of these other areas? So for me, I really enjoy teaching. So what I was able to do, so prior to me coming to the campus, the advisors in the office didn't teach. Uh, and I first approached Megumi. I was like, I want to design a class. I want to teach something to help our students. I was like, oh, now might not be the best time. So let's just put it together as a series of workshops. So I put that together. But before I went to actually propose it, it's like, we think the time is right. Now is when we're going to try and make it a formal class and present that and jump through all the paperwork of creating the course numbers, submitting all the materials, and go through that whole process. So first taught the course, which is Academic Exploration Through Advising was the title that I gave it. It has gone through 3 different course numbers at the moment. So started off as an exploratory, or not exploratory, um, experimental. That's the word. It started as an experimental course before it got a permanent course number. Um, so I've been teaching it since spring 2014, and yeah, designed to really emphasize that self-reflective process with our students. And from there, we've branched out to a couple other courses within the unit. Um, with our most, well, the most recent one that's already on the books, we offered this past summer as like a summer bridge type course, or for this first time freshman, more of like a traditional, orientation to the institution and majors, but with an exploratory lens. We had one, I think since fall 2016 or so. It was a transition course from the first year to the second year. So it was called the Freshmore Experience, was the title that some of the other advisors gave it. We've since reworked it, and the title's going to change a little bit. But that idea, yeah, of connecting, hey, looking at the sophomore slump and everything there. The newest course that I am putting together that should be on the books for next fall, because everything takes a year to get pushed through, is a more special topics course in major and career exploration. So that's definitely geared towards students who have been through the process quite a while and are needing that additional support. So we have a scaffolded 4-course system now that I'm kind of overseeing. So exploratory curricula is kind of my project. If we're jumping back to the faculty model, I could kind of go off on the courses for quite for a little bit, but yeah, so 75% of our time, direct one-on-one client interaction or student appointments, program development that supports the office and supports working with our exploratory students. The next big chunk of our time, so professional development and scholarly contributions. Uh, for us, that's 20% of our time, and that's where presenting at NACADA is considered scholarship for us. That's the way our document is written. Writing book reviews, and also publishing is encouraged. That's definitely a category that other faculty understand when they look through the review and the application process. But specifically, our document doesn't require publishing, even though a lot of us are working towards that. Um, so publications, and then also professional development. So that's where attending NACADA or attending these workshops is part of our job. We need to have that professional development. We need to stay on top of current models of advising, current theories, and how we can better serve our students. I know we've heard quite a bit whenever we're at NACADA. That's like, University of Hawaii has a pretty large representation all the time. And why is that? Um, and that is because a lot of us are faculty specialists and we need to be involved. Um, and then the final category, that's service, which is 5% of our time. That's where serving on boards or committees, both at the national level, so that's where NACADA definitely comes into play there, the university level. So I'm on our general education committee this year. I've served on different boards in the past. Or I'm on a faculty council for our interdisciplinary studies program, and then other projects within the unit as well, or across our University of Hawaii system. So The breakdown of those different things means that we're not only working one-on-one with students, and has that little bit of a split focus at times where it's like, okay, it's never you can't like map out your week. It's like, all right, so we've got, the 40-hour work week, 75% of that is this many hours. So this is, how we're going to build it up. It would be great if we ever got to a world where we could be that clear with things, but we know there are ebbs and flows with advising, and students need our help. And I think that's the mentality that our office has too, is that the students are really our priority. But if we're not there, we can't help them. So going through that tenure process is interesting. So I'm going to go into that whole process now, just because it is a real formal structure. It is the exact same process and review that our instructional and research faculty go through. There is the university deadline that it's usually the first Friday in October that you have to submit all your material to the dean or department chair, who there will then be a 5-person department faculty committee who does the initial review of the application materials. And so I have served on those ever since I got tenure. So then there's a formal vote onto whether tenure is recommended, and if they're also applying for promotion, that whole process. And then it goes to department chair, who does their review and write-up, then to the dean, who does their review and write-up, and then it goes on to the tenure and promotion review committee, which is across the entire campus. So it's typically 7 or 8 faculty members, and there's guaranteed to be at least one specialist on there if there's a specialist applying. So that's really important for our document, to be able to showcase what we do to people who don't know what we do. And that's usually why the advising specialists documents are usually way longer than in research and instructional documents, because we've gone to the university holds a lot of, here's how to prepare your documents for tenure and promotion, and the recommendations like your dossier or your narrative should really be 9 pages max. I was like, I was looking at mine. I think mine was 25 pages just to explain what we're doing. And it's not a hard and fast rule of 9, but it's, for research and instructional faculty, it's a lot more like, these are the projects we were working on, or these are the classes that we taught, and here's the evaluations as appendices. Yeah, we can't do that as easily, and especially because advising across the campus is very different. We have, I keep saying this number, so I hope it's 100% accurate, but roughly 24 advising offices on campus. And not every office is staffed with 100% faculty specialists. So the models are going to be very different. So even if we're reviewing, so if I was reviewing an application from the College of Natural Sciences, their department criteria is going to be different. Their expectations are going to be different. So we do have to be careful and explain, what makes us unique and how that goes through. Our campus was part of the pilot group for the Excellence in Academic Advising. And part of the recommendations that we saw there is we have our faculty specialists who have a very structured, systematic, understandable career ladder, but our administrative professional, technical, or APT professional advisors don't. That's not as clear. So comparing the groups, we wanted to make that a little bit easier. So that was a recommendation that was put forth from our EAA committee. But I bring that up because the role of our professional advisors, professional staff advisors, the APTs, is they're almost completely focused on meeting with students, and that's their primary role. So they're probably more like 95% one-on-one appointments with students. So they're going to have a lot more appointments, but not be contributing in the same way. It's something that I know a lot of offices encourage, but not part of their contracted role. So there's differences on the campus, and I think it should never be seen as like a better than, or this is, anyone who's an APT should be consider like moving onto a faculty role because they're different, and that's kind of by design. Long-winded, really just looking at like this faculty model,
Yeah.
and there's its place for different offices and different models, even within the same campus. I mean, the University of Hawaii is a 10 campus system too. So I know even looking at the other 4-year institutions, their models are going to be different, and their criteria is going to be different.
Yeah. No, I find that absolutely fascinating. And yeah, just thinking about the whole process. I mean, but what's, I think, I'm sure there's pros and cons to all of it, but like it seems like with this tenure process, I mean, it is a whole process and
Mm-hmm,
you kind of have to prove yourself and with a lot of this documentation as well.
mm-hmm,
But I think, yeah, I don't think one is better than the other, where it's like faculty advisor, tenure, professional advisor, staff, whatever. But I think one thing that kept popping into my mind is individuals I've talked to where, like in this case, professional development is part of it. It's
yeah.
part of that role. But there are a lot of individuals at other institutions where that's not officially part of their role.
Mm-hmm,
And a lot of times too, sometimes it's even frowned upon where it's like, I want to take a little bit of time to read articles or attend a
mm-hmm.
conference. And so, yeah, I mean, it just seems to be different all around.
Definitely. And I think the other important piece with that too is the scholarly contributions. So not only are we taking in from the professional development side, but we're also putting back. And I think that's something just as an association, as a career field, or just as a profession, we need to keep doing that. Um, I know, I mean, Nakata has great avenues for getting that publication or getting our ideas out there. And that's something that I think is really important just for any advisor because it's not encouraged at most other institutions in the
Mhm.
same way. I mean, we get lucky with some and who are very good and really supported in that. But I think that's something that all advisors can contribute to the field and something that, we should make that less intimidating, but also encouraging the research and the scholarship of advising needs to be promoted more.
Yeah, definitely. Now, kind of going back to your teaching, just I was on Rate My Professors, take what you will with that site. But I was looking and I was very impressed. I mean, I'm just going to read a couple of them. So, one person wrote, "Great professor. If he taught another class, I would take it. He's very easygoing. The class is really good if you are unsure of your major." And then someone else wrote, "A great class not only for exploring different majors, but life skills in general. And Matt isn't afraid to adjust the topics covered in class based on what the students want to learn about." So, um, yeah, I always like if I know someone taught, I'm like, let me just see if they're on Rate My Professors and see what's there.
What I will also say with Rent My Professor, I'm pretty sure they're still on there because there are fake reviews of me on that site. Um, and it was a former roommate of mine who still had his undergraduate login information for the institution. So he's like, let me see if I can write something. So he's done that twice now. And I leave it on there because it's a great example when sharing with students about the dangers of Rate My Professor.
Mhm.
But according to Rate My Professor, I have taught 2 courses in hypnosis. Um, so yeah, I think that's hilarious, and it's a great example that I
Mhm.
tell students like you can never fully trust, take everything with a grain of salt. There's no
Yep.
oversight. Stuff we all know, but it's great for them to actually see, and
Mhm.
it's a really fun part of the conversation with students in class,
Yep.
especially as we're talking about like registration and planning for future semesters. I mean, I asked them, I was like, how many of you looked at my Rate My Professor? So I know
Mhm.
I'm on there, and I have looked at it.
Yep.
And then it's just a great opportunity to share. It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like working with the students in a smaller discussion format because I hate lecturing
Mhm.
and I hate talking all the time, even though my long-winded answers wouldn't showcase that. Um, Really, the way I've designed the classes is that it is a discussion-based class, and for a lot of these students, this is the smallest class they've ever had. It's capped at 20 students. Um, the format is very different because I don't always use PowerPoint presentations or just stand up and lecture. Half the time I'm not even standing, I'm sitting at the front. But I approach the class or working with the students like, here's the general themes and topics we're going to talk about. And these are the intentions I have behind it. Not always explicitly saying that to them, but I'm not all focused, okay, I need to hit these specific activities or things in the class. And starting out with a discussion or just like, okay, here's what we're reading today. We have an opening go around question that everyone has to start off talking. They have to say something at least once in every class. And they're given that question ahead of time so that they can prepare. Not everyone likes to think on their feet and answer questions that way. So trying to hit different modalities there. And as the class, like as it goes through, they're a lot more comfortable having this discussion. It's a lot more difficult doing everything on Zoom. I've definitely been struggling with that this semester. They're finally getting comfortable chatting now that it's the end of the semester. But yeah, back when we had everything in person, yeah, having these discussions, bringing up these conversation topics. I had students who were asking like, well, what's a credit score and how do we navigate that? It's like, all right, well, here, let's focus on that. We have to meet students where they are, and we have to kind of address these concerns that they have. And even if I'm not the expert in it, we can look up those resources together and navigate through some of those. And a lot of times students I think some of them have figured it out and have tried to like make it a challenge to see how much of a tangent they can go off of and how I can still bring it back to the discussion. Because really, these are just long-term advising sessions that they have to do the homework for because they get a grade. And that's really why I thought having it as a course format as opposed to a workshop series was important, because for some of our students, they need that assignment, the deadlines, the due dates, the grades, to force them to do the activities that we all know they'll benefit from. So yeah, and with a lot of that too, there's a lot of background self-reflection that they're doing. Within our institution, we have graduation requirements of so many writing intensive courses. The specific designation requires at least 16 pages of writing throughout the semester. There's all these other criteria that we have to apply for and demonstrate for this designation. And this academic exploration through advising course has always carried that designation, that writing intensive. So they're doing a lot of self-reflective papers throughout the course. And having them write things out has that benefit of engaging them more. But because they're more from the self-reflective, they're more open to trying. It's not this formal research paper. Even though I grade the grammatical syntax part that way, because they still need to get they work on that side of it. But that's where, yeah, I have this flexible approach, but we still have these main outcomes, these things that they are going to get by the end of it. If we want to start diving into like curriculum development and course designing things, I use the backwards design model where everything's focused on, okay, what are the outcomes for the course? And then how can they demonstrate that before we get down to the individual assignments and individual like talking points or lesson plan. It also has helped that I've been teaching this class for 7 years now, that the topics and things that I know, I can just ramble on about a lot of different pieces. And the other benefit that I've noticed from students, and a lot of this is still anecdotal, I haven't done like a formal review of it. That's the dissertation that I'm working on. What the students find is that having this connection with someone on campus is what's most helpful. And having someone they can identify to point them in different directions, because they know I'm an advisor. I talk about it all the time. I talk about myself, use stories, from my personal experience. That helps the students kind of get the sense of who faculty are in general, who people on campus are, makes them more human, and then lets them feel more comfortable asking questions, typically. And that, again, that's the approach that we should be having. Like, I'm not going to be hard and fast. So this is everything we have to get through that day. we'll get to it if it's important, and we'll find ways that we might have to brush something later. But let's all piece it together. That's also tricky when I'm giving formal presentations, because at this point I'm very comfortable in front of people, like
Mhm.
giving presentations, uh, and that's where sometimes I can be a little too conversational. But like having that engagement is what helps everybody.
Mhm.
I feel I That's been the hardest part teaching online, is I feel like I have to be just presenting information and talking, and losing some of that dialogue. So hopefully these evaluations kind of stay around the same level, but we'll see.
Yeah. What's funny much about Rate My Professors, yeah, I did see the hypnosis one. I was like, okay, maybe he did teach this class, or, but yeah, I tell the same thing to students in terms like take it with a grain of salt. But I say the one thing you probably want to look for when you're looking at these comments is, they're always looking like, is it an easy instructor or not? And I'm like, look at what the comments are consistent, if anything. Like that might give you the
Mhm,
best idea of like, is this a professor you think you'll connect with, or the class you'll connect with, and see what's consistent about it that seems factual, but not like the opinion of like, I hated this instructor or I really love this instructor. Go with what's facts. That seems like facts, and more than likely
mhm,
that's probably going to be true. But you were talking about stories, and I think that's a great segue into conference presentations. And
mhm.
one you most recently did at the Cincinnati conference in October was traveling the hero's journey. And I'm sure many listeners know about the hero's journey or have a slight idea what it is, but can you talk about what the hero's journey is, and maybe also why that was an important topic for you to present in relation to academic advising?
Yes, let's dive into that. So the fun thing with the hero's journey, so this actually was able to tie back in a lot with my undergrad, with creative writing. Hero's journey is this framework, with how stories have been told pretty much throughout time. Joseph Campbell was looking at mythologies from across the world and identifying these major components of what we're looking at, with the hero leaving the ordinary world, leaving where they're comfortable, having an inciting incident, going through trials, and coming out the other end being changed. So I love stories. I Movies, film, everything. You can see these different patterns throughout. Most famously, if we look at Star Wars: A New Hope, George Lucas was very much a fan of Campbell and structured the entire movie around the hero's journey. You also hear called the monomyth idea, but because so many of us know stories, we engage with media, we know pop culture, at different levels, and because it seems to be a more universal understanding of stories, or you hear of the three act structure and everything. Um, what what I was looking at with that framework is a way that we can help our students understand their journey at an institution. Um, and part of it also, with what I was presenting too, is this idea that the students, if they're seeing themselves as the hero, they can feel more in control of their actions and kind of see what they're doing, and know where to go to for support and kind of see themselves in that role. And I think it was also really important to look at this idea for first gen students who don't have the language, who don't have that understanding, where really for them stepping into an institution is a complete whole other world. They are not in what Joseph Campbell calls the ordinary world. They're not at home anymore, even if physically they're still staying at home. This is new uncharted territory, and you know some of the things that our hero picks up along the way in the hero's journey is, they have a mentor, but that mentor's not always there. Um, they're going to go away. Again, if we go back to A New Hope, we know that Obi Wan Kenobi goes away. He's not there throughout the entire story. I hope that's not a spoiler for anyone. Um, but really, we're seeing some of these different pieces that you know initially our hero needs to rely on the mentor a lot, and the mentor is going to be training and guiding them. But we're again not going to be there, and they need to go through their trials on their own. Uh, but it also provides a lens where students can think about their previous experiences as trials, what they've overcome, how they've accomplished it, and have they gotten those? those boons, those tools, those resources that they can carry forward going on. They can use this to kind of break down their journey in an individual course or a semester or just life in general, because the hero's journey cycle can be a continuous process. Uh, so again, what I was doing or why I was bringing this concept forth is another way just for advisor training to think about, okay, how are we relating to our students? How are we helping them understand? Um, with Nakata's core competencies, the pillars and all that, the relational component is one that I think, or maybe this is just my own personal experience, I haven't focused on as much. It's something that it is more skill development, the things that you can work on. And we need all these different aspects of the core competencies. But being able to relate to students and help them understand, I think that's the important part. With advising in general, yeah, we can share information, but if they're not understanding or retaining it, it's not useful. Um, and this hero's journey idea, as we're using stories, Peter Hagen's narrative theory of advising definitely plays a role too. That was the other piece that I talked about in the presentation, which also intimidating that Peter was there in the audience too. And yeah, but but how we use stories, and I mean, I see this a lot in the classes that I teach. Being able to talk to the students about, okay, yeah, I do have a degree in creative writing. My path was to go to financial planning and then here as an advising advisor, that it's not a linear path for anybody. It's a rarity to have a linear path. Um, and understand what choices they can make. We can get into whole other career development theories. We can talk about planned happenstance, chaos theory of career. Um, that might be a whole nother podcast, but um, but having those choices and seeing that they are in control of some of this, even with all these external forces that are outside of their control. Um, that's where, yeah, being able to relate and talk with students that way. And again, you're not always going to have this as this formal, like, here's your handout of fill out all the stages of your hero's journey that you're on. That can be a fun activity for some students, just to help them frame that way. But it's more, again, for us to think about how we're working with our students and how we can spin and talk about their experience, their journey in a positive way, on what they can overcome, what they can achieve. And sometimes what they're going to find is, it's taking a step away from the institution is what they need to go and be successful, and not seeing that as failure, but as one of their challenges, one of their journeys that they're taking to then come out at the end victorious.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I remember I didn't get to see it live, but I got to watch it on the on demand. And yeah, you referencing with Peter Hagen's book, and but you were also talking about like hey, we are all storytellers, and if you're looking at theories like appreciative advising and developmental advising
Mhm.
actually tie into this type of approach. But it was, yeah, but you're also mentioning like it's not some cookie cutter pattern,
Yeah.
and you really do have to be flexible and adaptable when you're doing this. And I was going to ask you about Peter being there. Like, how was that? Did you know ahead of time that he was going to show up?
I knew he was at the conference,
Yeah.
and I suspected he was going to show up. I was talking to some other people. They're like, "Oh, Peter's going to be there." Um, and so I saw him come in. I was like, "All right, you know what? I'm not ready. I'm not starting yet." I walked down. I talked to him. Um, I was joking. It's like, "Go easy on me." Um, and Jenny Bloom was there too. So like, I've got these
Oh
big
my
name people.
goodness.
Which I mean, I've known Jenny for a long time too.
Yeah.
So it was fine, and I didn't get like intimidated by it.
Mhm.
And Peter did come up afterwards, and he was saying, "It's like you did a good job. It was a good application and everything."
Mhm.
Um, and we had some other people in the audience who were very engaged and talkative with it too. So that was a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's always more fun to give presentations in person or just to a live audience, whether it's Zoom or whatever. Having that engagement interaction definitely is fun.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I definitely felt like I had to be on my A game for that, and I didn't feel like I was, but yeah, it was a good time. We had fun.
Good.
And if anyone's going to be in the audience about their theory, I think Peter is one of the best.
Mhm.
Just because, yeah, we're going to tell stories, we're going to share, we're going to, look at the application of it. So,
Mhm. Yeah, awesome.
Fun time.
And I think we'll have to have a part two because to talk more about this, also talk about, I wanted to also touch base with, you being a mentor as well and kind of how that works at Manoa. And shout out to Shannon Mark, who I got to chat with for a little bit because I know he's your mentee. So yeah, we'll
Mhm.
definitely maybe we'll have both of you on for a
Yeah,
future
that would be a lot
episode.
of fun, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll definitely could try to pencil that in. But if listeners have any questions on anything that was gone over today, how can they reach out to you?
The best way to get in touch with me is via email, even though I will apologize. Usually prioritize student emails first over other people, but my email is matt.eng, so MATT period ENG at hawaii.edu. So again,
Awesome.
matt.eng at hawaii.edu.
Yeah, and I don't think you need to apologize. I think everyone
Yeah.
understands. Yeah, that the students will come first with everything. But Matt,
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure, and look forward to chatting with you again, and seeing you in person again. And we'll definitely do a part two at some point with this podcast. You take care.
Thanks. You too.